Welcome back to This Was Supposed to Be Easy, your go-to podcast for connection, joy, and a good dose of laughter.
Hosted by two friends who've seen enough of life to know that it's never as simple as it sounds
or looks.
Each conversation celebrates the diverse journeys we travel, the moments of bravery, the strength we didn't know we had, and the joy we find along the way.
Because let's be honest, life is full of things that were supposed to be easy, but turned out to be harder.
And definitely funnier
than we thought. This is Amy.
And this is Cheryl. And if it were easy, we wouldn't be here. Today we have Casey with us. And Casey, I must admit that I have been mispronouncing your last name for several years because I always say Sterle. And I am pretty confident I heard you say it quite differently a few weeks ago when we were together. So maybe you could introduce yourself to our audience.
I will. And I'll pronounce it correctly. How's that?
That would be great.
My name is Casey Sterle, and I'm a mom, and I'm going to talk some about parenting today. But the funny part about you mispronouncing my name is it's regularly mispronounced. It is spelled Sterle. So it's not weird that people would say sterile. It's Sterle. My husband will, like, if we go to a restaurant, he'll actually spell it to the people with two E's at the end just so that they'll say it correctly. And on, the phones and all the things, if it comes in on my car, it'll say, call from Sarah Sterle for my daughter. Unless I write it in the code as Sterlee also. Because I teach, people see my name often, and my students will often correct them. And I've been called all sorts of things, Mrs. Sterle, Mrs. Squirrely, which happens to be my favorite because I'm a little bit squirrely. But it is regularly pronounced sterile by people. I went to this wedding when I was pregnant. I was pregnant with my first daughter, and I was 8 months pregnant. So I wasn't small pregnant. And my family grew up in Europe. And this was actually one of our friends from Europe that we were going to their wedding. I have a special story. That'll be for another day, probably. I have a special story. It's a German tradition. It's the German wedding cup. And because it was friends from Europe, they asked if I would present the German wedding cup. It was a wedding that I have to be honest, I wasn't totally looking forward to going to. And my mom and my friend's mom from growing up, they were like, you have to go and represent the family. So I was already not like super happy about being there, but then per the usual, got there, loved, met friends and saw people that I hadn't seen for a long time. But they're getting ready to do the German wedding cup. The whole wedding party is there. The room is filled. And my sister and my friend were taking full advantage of the open bar that I was 8 months pregnant, could not take advantage of. They call for the time for the German wedding cup. I have to walk up on stage and the DJ says, and presenting the German wedding cup is Casey Sterle. And I walk out 8 months pregnant. And he goes, not so sterile.
No.
And,
wow.
I was like, true story, right? So it's mispronounced often. That's probably my most public and funny story about it being mispronounced. And we still laugh about it to this day. And my sister and her friend who were at the table, they almost fell off their chairs. They thought it was so funny. I've just always thought it was a good one. I am not so sterile. I actually have been pregnant 7 times. I have 4 children, and my husband and I lost 3 children. And I think that those are all parts of our parenting journey. Mm-hmm. And it's the joy and the sadness and the hardness of all of those things that go along with being in life. Mm-hmm. So it never offends me when people mispronounce my name. But I've been called Casey Sterle lots of times, and I'm not sterile, which is why I can talk about parenting.
I love that you started with that story because Amy and I have been talking since we started talking about having a podcast. I think we've been talking about wanting to have you on as a guest. And for me, it's because I laugh so hard every time that I'm with you. But at the same time, we can talk deep, right? We have a lot of deep topics and deep conversations. And so We even struggled with, well, what might the conversation be? Until we decided we were going to call it our first conversation. We suspect that you will be a guest more than one time. We did decide that for today, we wanted to maybe reboot our conversations about parenting that so many people have asked about. But you mentioned that you're a teacher, and I'm wondering if you can do a quick, what grade or grades do you and have you taught?
So I have taught quite a few grades. I am a 26-year veteran in teaching. And so I've been around the block, maybe, I guess, but in the same school system. And that makes it a little bit of an interesting journey too, because I've been a part of the same community. And it's not how I grew up. I grew up on a military post, and there was very transient. People moved in and out. And I happened to marry a farmer. So I live in a community where people seldom leave. And I've gotten to watch students grow from very young, to graduation. And it is a joy to watch it. And in that space, I started here in kindergarten, and I taught kindergarten for a couple of years at the beginning. Then I opened their Young Fives program here. And I switched from that to their early childhood program. And I did 0 to 5 programming. I say 0 to 5. I did a lot of parent education, but our license started at 2.5. For those of you in the early childhood space that know about licensing, you know that licensing is its own beast. And so that was real fun to explore and learn about. But we expanded our early childhood programs here in Leslie, which was always a dream of mine to do. And we went from 1 classroom to 7 classrooms, and blending and braiding all different needs and kinds of programs. And I did that for 10 years, 9 or 10 years. And then I dipped into the COVID space, right? Which is, who knows how long that lasted. But during that time, I went to teaching 5th grade. I really loved that. And I taught 5th grade both in the classroom and online. Also has its own story. And then in a small school district, often classes are dependent upon how big each class is. And I moved to 3rd grade. I was in 3rd grade for a year. And then I had an opportunity to go back to kindergarten. And that's actually during part of my presidency for Michigan AEYC. And being connected in the early childhood community was pretty important to me. And so I was happy to move back there. I did that for a couple of years. And then a 5th grade position opened. They needed someone to move. And I have always felt a little bit of passion in this community about our middle school. Our 5th grade is in our middle school. And it's always felt a little bit early, but in true fashion, small school district, where do you have space and how do things go? It's often based on what's going on in buildings and how many classrooms you have. And so I called the principal here and I said, I know there's a 5th grade space. I loved 5th grade. And I want to be a part of what makes a better transition between elementary and middle school. So if you're interested in that work, that's what my passion is. And he was really passionate about it too. And he welcomed me to this building. So I'm working on that this year with families, and we're doing a lot of great work. But I have in that space, long answer to a short question, I have taught lots of things. And in that same space, I have, of my own children, some gaps in spaces too. I have 2 adult children, and I have 2 children who one is middle school and one is still elementary school. So I also kind of run the gamut, not just in experience of teaching different grades. Right now, I'm running the gamut of parenting along every space, it feels like. My sister was teasing me the year I had a college student, a high school student, a middle school student, and an elementary school student. And she said, what kind of family planning is that? And I said, oh, it's universe planning. Okay, that's what we do. We go by the universe. Someone else is in charge and it's not me.
I mean, I've heard Amy say she's had kids at 3 different schools most of her life, right?
Yep, that is absolutely. And right now, we're kind of ending the season of 1 in college, 1 in high school, 1 in middle school. Next year, we have the 1 in college, the oldest as a senior in high school, the youngest as a freshman in high school. So we'll have kind of that overlap, but that's really been it. We have always had multiple schools for our 3. So I get it.
Yeah. And it's really interesting to watch them at all the different levels. And you kind of think every once in a while, you're like, I think I have this figured out. And then you don't. You might have figured it out for one, but I'm going to tell you, it's going to be different for the next. It's such a journey in so many spaces.
It is a journey. And I love that you brought it back to your own children and connected it back to teaching and all of the things, because as we tried to think about what could today be about, you said something that really stood out to both of us. And I think will appeal to everyone, which is that parenting has actually been more joyful than you were led to believe. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, it's so interesting to me. I think that for most of my life, how did I end up in education? I wasn't a traditional dreamer of being a teacher. That wasn't what I thought I would do necessarily. I always wanted to be a mom. One of the things that I just always wanted to do. And I pictured myself as a stay at home mom, who takes care of my family in my home. And my dad specifically was like, hey, this world is not going to take care of you, and you can't rely on someone else taking care of you. You've got to have a plan that puts you in a space of being able to take care of yourself, and then who knows where that will lead you. But what would you do if you had to do something different other than that? Really great advice that I probably didn't understand fully at the time, because I was probably pretty resentful. As I have two kids in college right now, sounds about right that I was resentful at that time, right? But that's how I ended up in teaching, was because I wanted to be a parent. So I knew I wanted to do something with kids. And when I went to college, teaching ended up being where I spent time and found joy. So I really just always thought I would be a parent. And people people often talk about, oh, it's difficult in terms of you've got to figure out childcare, you've always got to take care of someone. And I feel like maybe I didn't know how much I would laugh. And I didn't internalize that until, it's funny because I laugh all of the time with my children. I laugh, and often, I have to be really honest, I often laugh when it's not appropriate to laugh. At times when maybe I should be more serious, they say something and I can't. My husband is like, you got to get it together. But on the other side of that, I think that I'm showing my kids something really, really important, because I don't think you can get through life without laughing. I don't think you can get through life without joy. And there are going to be so many times in this life that it's going to be really hard and it's not fun or easy. And how do you get through it? And I think that parenting is really difficult. It's really hard. It requires a lot of hard work. And I feel like I'm a blessed person that I find joy in it, that we laugh on a regular basis. And when we talked last week and I started to think about that, I realized that it's because of how I was raised. The family that I came from shaped that part of me. I laughed a lot, and I maybe realized that I should have always recognized that parenting would be as joyful as it is for me, because that's how I grew up. But when I think about how I framed it in my mind, I thought about the hard stuff. I thought about paying bills or trying to, figure out life. And yes, it's about all of those things. It's about your kids not doing what you say what you tell them to do, or trying to get them to be responsible. And is that stuff hard? Yeah, it's hard, but there's way more joy than that. And so I think that is where I find joy in parenting and why I find it to be really joyful. I can't stop laughing at them. What do they do that is really funny? Anything and everything. They come at me with the funniest things. And if you are Facebook friends with me, you will often see quotes from my family and my children on Facebook. And I do that for a specific reason, because it comes back to me. I will be one of those people who will really be sad if I ever lose my Facebook thing. In fact, I've backed it up before because I was afraid I would lose all of those memories from my kids. So that's where I find the joy in all of those things, that even when it's hard, I can laugh about it and find the things that are good and joyful.
Do you think that you are like that in other areas of your life too? Like, do you find that you oftentimes are kind of looking for the good in a situation, and this is just an additional kind of one of those? Or do you think like you do specifically because they're your children and it's your family and you came from a joyful family?
So I think that that's a really great question, because I just read something recently that it was like, if you are a person who looks for joy, you'll find it in more spaces. And it makes sense to me, because I often will say in the classroom too, success begets success, right? Why don't kids want to come to school? They don't want to come to school because they don't feel successful here. If we find places for them to feel that success, that's going to give them those endorphins, they're going to want to come back. And I feel like the same thing is true for joy. If you can look and find the joy in things, then you not only feel it, you laugh, you do the things that build your soul, and you look for more of it. And so I think it bleeds into every part of my life. We laugh more in the classroom than maybe some other spaces do. And I often worry. I was just telling my students the other day, I'm human in all forms, right? I'm just like other people. I often worry that people don't think I'm good at what I do. I worry that other teachers think that I don't do a good job. I worry that they think I laugh too much in my classroom, if that means I don't work, or that means I don't have high expectations. And so it is an interesting space to think about. Can you find joy everywhere? But it hasn't stopped me from finding joy because I think that we all need that. We need to find joy in all of those spaces. And the world is a hard place. I could spend a lot of time telling you about all the things that I think are wrong with the world, telling you about all the things that I think are difficult and sad. Speaking of my background, I said I was raised laughing and loving, and my family made it this way. My grandma, I can remember my grandma talking about the Great Depression and how hard that was on her family, and the hardships that they had. But we would have family reunions, and for a long time they were at the farm where my grandma grew up. We would play softball. We don't do this enough anymore, let me tell you. We had watermelon seed spitting contests
Oh, yes. Yeah.
at this one. Yeah. And I could hear my grandma and her siblings laughing and talking about how joyful their childhood was. And in this space of, oh my gosh, but we talked about the Great Depression and how and my grandparents, I mean, really my grandparents were 1920s. So did they live through the Great Depression? No, but they lived in the second part of it, right? With their parents parenting them from that experience. And I remember thinking, like, you had all of these stories about how hard it was. And now we're sitting in this space and they're laughing and they're talking about how great it was. Reminds me that no matter where we are, no matter who we are, there's joy to be found in spaces. And sometimes it's harder to find, but we've got to look for it and continue to find it and keep laughing at all of the funny things. My grandma has been gone since 2009. I am a person who can still hear her laugh.
Mm,
That's
that's beautiful.
one of the best memories that I have. I would say that that's when I think of relatives, I picture them smiling, I picture them laughing. And today, as I was thinking about some of the work that we do, if you have done work in spaces of trauma and resilience, one of the things that we talk about is epigenetics. And I don't know if that is a term that you are super familiar with, but the epigenetics of trauma that it lives within our various systems, as daunting as that can feel or seem, the great hope in it is that that also means that resilience is in there too. Laughter is in there, joy is in there, and what we bring from our past and what we give to our future, it's there, and we've got to find the hope in those places. And sometimes it's in the best laughter piece, for sure.
Laughter is the best medicine. I remember that section in the old Reader's Digest that was on the back of the toilet growing up, right?
Oh my gosh, you're so right. And wasn't that on the back of everybody's toilet? I feel like you could go into anybody's house and you were like, this is the place, right?
Yep.
Reader's Digest.
There's the Reader's
Yeah.
Digest.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. When you do think about growing up in a family that laughed a lot, you described your grandma and her siblings laughing at family reunions. But what did that look like day to day for you growing up in your family?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, good stories. Let me tell you that growing up in my family was, I don't think that I realized the gift in the space because that was who we were. And I didn't know any different.
Hmm.
It's really interesting now when I talk to other people or when I talk to my husband about how his family grew up or what they were doing. And I did not know that other families maybe didn't laugh as much as us. that they didn't find goodness in difficulty. There are all sorts of things that I thought were completely normal that I find out were really just things that happened in my family. We moved to Europe when I was young. That was a really interesting thing to have happen. My dad was a teacher in the 80s, and it was a hard time. Regularly, my dad got laid off. And I say regularly, it probably was twice, right, in my memory. But to me, it maybe felt bigger. And so there were a couple of summers where I remember my mom crying and being upset. I didn't really realize why. But my dad had been laid off, and she was worried about where money was going to come from. One year, my mom was really upset. She couldn't get us new shoes for school. She took us in Mount Pleasant, because you guys are Mount Pleasant people, you'll recognize this. She took us to the Mole Hole in downtown Mount Pleasant. And the Mole Hole had this wall of shoelaces. And my mom was like, everybody's getting new shoelaces this year. That's what we're getting before school. New shoelaces. I can remember looking at the shoelaces on that wall and just thinking, man, nobody gets new shoelaces for school. Like, you always just get the shoelaces that come with your shoes. Who gets new shoelaces? And I can still see them. They were metallic silver shoelaces, and they were so long that I had to like tie them and wrap them around the bottom of my shoes and then tie the bows at the top. Otherwise they flopped around. We loved doing that. And when I grew out of those shoes, you better believe I took those shoelaces out of those shoes and I moved them to my new shoes when we could get those. And when we were talking about this in our family, my mom said, I cried in the Mole Hole that day. And she cried because it was a really hard part of parenting, right? She was used to getting us new clothes and getting us new shoes. And instead of sitting in a space of, I can't buy you anything, my mom did this super strong thing and found what she could do. And what do I remember from that? I remember this great joy in those shoelaces. And I can still, in my kindergarten picture where I sat with my legs spread wide apart, so my underwear shows in the class picture. I know I've got those metallic shoelaces on. I started out with, we moved to Europe. This was one of the things that happened. We moved because my dad was feeling tired of how difficult it was to stay in the space of education. And he found this postcard that said, teach for the government. And he tells the story that he filled it out and dropped it in a mailbox and didn't think of it again. And in March of that year, so I think my dad said that was in the fall. And in March of that year, my dad got called. I say it was March. It could have been any other time, right? Spring, maybe. My dad got called for an interview, and I think he went to Detroit for the interview, and we didn't really know what it was. What I do know is that my dad was home that night for dinner, and we did something we never do for dinner. We ate ice cream sundaes. Ice cream sundaes for dinner. Like, we did not have something else for dinner. We had ice cream sundaes, and it was a really big deal. We all laugh about it when we tell stories like this because we all remember it a little bit differently, right? You have your own perspective. And sometimes my sisters are like, I don't think I remember that part. And I'm like, oh, I remember it. Therefore, to me, it happened, right? And could have been related to a different day, but we had ice cream sundaes for dinner. And then it was a couple months later. It was during the summer. We were getting ready, and my dad got a phone call, and they asked him if he wanted to go to Brain. And my dad when he tells the story, he's like, I couldn't understand what she was saying, but she was offering me a teaching job, and I knew it was overseas. And I've said yes. That evening, or very close to it, we were watching on the news that ships were being bombed in the Persian Gulf off the coast of Bahrain. And my dad thinks that he might have accepted a job in Bahrain. And my mom was, worried. But like 3 weeks later, they called and asked if he wanted to go to West Germany, because at the time it was still the East and the West. This was the early 80s. And our family, in 3 weeks, they called us, and school had already started. They said, you're going to have to go fast. And people in Mount Pleasant, there were a number of people who just thought my family was crazy. And rightfully so, we are crazy. But moving to Europe really wasn't the craziest thing we ever did. But the moving trucks rolled up. They packed up all of our stuff, and we flew to Europe. Through it all, we still laughed and joked. It was my dad's first airplane ride. I can remember he was in his 30s, and he'd never been on a plane before. I mean, I had full experience. I'd been on a plane twice. My mom had taken me out to visit my aunt in Oregon. So at 8,
You knew it all.
must have known it all. The singular memory I have of that flight is sitting next to my dad and looking at his hands holding on to the armrest. And I remember thinking, why is dad holding the armrest so tightly? His knuckles are white. I found out years later that it was his very first airplane ride.
Imagine being on your first airplane ride and you've taken a job in another country and you're moving your whole family. How many siblings did you have? How many people were in
There
your
are 3 siblings. I grew up there's a family of 4 girls. All the time, my dad was a football coach, and he had 4 girls.
Of
And
course.
yeah, of course. And my grandpa used to say, "Come on, boys." And I remember thinking when I was a kid, "Oh my gosh, this is so embarrassing. Grandpa doesn't know we're girls." And we would often say to him, "Grandpa, we're girls." And he would go, "I know, boys, come on." And we would all laugh about it. But when I was really little, I really thought that my grandpa didn't realize it. And then when I was older, I realized, he's just teasing us. So yeah, when I think about it, even like that, from a very young time, my grandparents laughed, they teased us, we joked, all of those things, that happen in families. But we laughed about everything and on a regular basis. When we first moved here, we didn't have a place to live. We lived in a hotel. It was a little, if you've traveled through Europe, you know that there are like little guest houses. It's not like hotels that we were used to in the United States of America. And so they take us, it's my parents and there are 4 of us girls. And my little sister was in kindergarten, so she is the youngest. And my oldest sister was in 9th grade. And so she is the oldest. And the rest of us fall in between. There's 8 years between top and the bottom. And we go into this hotel. None of us speak any German. And they take us to one room that has 2 beds in it. And they say 2 in here. And then they open another door and they say 2 in here. And then they walk all the way across to the other side of the hotel and open that door. And they say, and 2 in here. And that happens to be the only one with a bathroom. The other 2, you have to go down the hallway and use a bathroom that you're sharing with everybody else. Now, in the world today, I cannot imagine what my parents, right, were going through. But my sister Dina and I, she's the next one up from me. She and I stayed in one room, and my oldest sister Krista and my youngest sister Bree, they stayed in another room, and we were like that for a while. We lived in that hotel for 3 months, I believe, before we found an apartment to live in. But we ended up moving to it. They moved us to another room where there were 2 double beds, and it was like hooked to my parents' room, but it didn't happen to be open when we first moved in. So we're moved to Europe, going to this place we never been before, don't speak any German. And this is what my parents are faced with. Okay. And I can't even imagine what it was like for them in that space to trust us to lock the doors at night, not know who's in the hallway. But I will tell you this, I never felt scared or frightened in that space. My parents tucked us in every night and we talked about what to do if we needed them. And in true form, we continued to laugh about lots of things and moved on and did things with all of the joy that we did on a regular basis. My little sister cried every day. I went to a school where it was K through 3. I was in like this little portable that wasn't quite attached to the school that was K through 3. And she was in first grade. I said kindergarten. I was wrong. She was in first grade. But every morning, the phone in my portable would ring. And I knew what was about to happen. My teacher would answer the phone and she would go, "Cassie, office." And I knew it's because my little sister was crying in the office and they couldn't get her to calm down. And I would go to the office and I would help and I would sit with her and hold her hand. And I would listen to the secretaries in the office talk about that my mom wouldn't come and she wouldn't help. And I knew that they were talking about my mom.
Mhm.
And I didn't find out until later. My mom had no car. We had moved to a new place. My dad had a car and he had to go to work. My mom was in the hotel by herself all day. Every morning, my little sister would call my mom, and in the office, my mom would try and talk her through being resilient and staying in school and getting an education in first grade. What does that mean? But those people were being critical of my mom, who was doing everything she could to try and help my sister, but she couldn't get to her. And again, I didn't know because every day when we came home, we laughed. My mom asked us about school and we would laugh about the things that happened or the things that she did that day. She would find her way to a new store or do all sorts of things. But I didn't know what she was going through at the hotel without us in that space. So, again, something that probably could have been very, very difficult, but I lived through it with joy and didn't see the other part until later. We went to church every Sunday. One Sunday we woke up and I was throwing up, not going to go to church, right? And my little sister said she was sick. But my dad took my three sisters to church and my mom stayed home with me. They walked into church and my little sister threw up all over the pew, everywhere. And here's my dad. My dad, men, they don't carry purses. He's got nothing, right? And this lady, he still talks about this lady behind him takes out one tissue and says, sir, here. And my little sister looks up and to the whole church, she goes, I told you I was sick.
She's like, don't lay this one on me, Dad. I said,
Nope. I told you I was sick. And sure enough, they walked into the hotel and my mom was like, what happened to church? And my dad was like, she said she was sick. And, we were the family who puked all over a pew. But that's another thing that sure could be super problematic, but we found the joy in that too. My sister never got yelled at for yelling in church. I told you I was sick. Instead, we laughed about it and thought my dad said, I should have listened.
but what a great way to respond when you're like dying of embarrassment,
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. All the things. So, in this world of things that could be difficult and frightening and scary, I really was blessed with parents who could find the joy in spaces and showed it to me. And it has filtered into the way I look at life and the way that I view parenting with my own kids. And when they do unbelievable things that I think, what is going on here? I can still find some joy in those spaces.
So speaking of some of those unbelievable things, and I know that you don't want to tell any stories without permission specifically, but
Mhm.
maybe some of those stories that are on Facebook already have that permission. I'm not sure. Do you have any of those unbelievable yet just make you laugh recent examples of just fun?
Oh, I do. It was my husband and I have been I said that we have adult children and we have younger children. That my oldest is 20 and my youngest right now is 9. You might relate to this thinking back on your parenting time with your kids where you kind of try and figure out when is it appropriate for them to spend some time by themselves in the house, right? When can you kind of dapple in that independence piece? And it's one of the things that I've really figured out too is that it's based on a number of things, like not just their age, but their maturity level. And for me, it's always been a thing of comfort for them. I want to ask their permission. Like, do you feel ready for this? Or what would make you feel ready for this? And our youngest in true fashion, she's the youngest, right? She's watched her older siblings go through all sorts of things. My husband is often home. We're on a farm too, and he works on the farm. So sometimes he's home but not home, right? He's home but he's out on the farm. And so this was a place where we felt like we were ready to dapple in some independence because he's close by, and we have a plan. If you need him when he's out, whether he's hunting, whether he's out on the farm, you go to the car and you honk the horn, and he'll know that means come home because you can usually hear that everywhere.
I love it.
So yeah, but it's, you figure out things along the way. So anyway, I came home from work one day. She had gotten off the bus and was by herself at home. And I walk in the door and I'm thinking, okay, I wasn't quite ready for the independence of this yet. But I was like, how'd it go? How's everything going? And she was like, oh, it's been great. And I walked into the bathroom and I was washing my hands. That's usually one of the things we do. You walk in the house, you wash your hands. It's like part of our thing. And she says, oh, don't use that hand towel. It's got poop on it. I was like, what? And she goes, oh yeah, it's got poop on it. And I said, how'd the hand towel get poop on it? And she goes, oh, well, I had to wipe it up off the floor. And I was like, you had to wipe poop up off the floor. How'd this happen? What was going on? And she goes, oh, well, I dropped poop on the floor. So you dropped poop on the floor, like it dropped from your bottom. And she said, oh no, it was from my hand.
It's getting better.
The more I asked the questions, the more it started to come. And this is where one of those times where, like I said, often I will start laughing uncontrollably and I have to like come back, but I maybe should be a little tiny bit more serious about, oh, is everything okay? Look, now I have a hand towel that has poop on it and there was poop on the floor, none of which are places where poop is supposed to be. I'm like trying to figure it out from the beginning. And in true kid fashion, she is not offering up any part of the story from beginning to end. And I was like, well, what was the poop doing in your hand? And she goes, well, I was throwing it. And I was like you were throwing poop in places? She goes, oh no, it was on my hand and I was throwing it off. And I was like, oh, okay. Now I've got a place to start, right? And she was going to the bathroom. She went to wipe. It was, as she put, a messier job than I thought. It got on her hand. In true fashion, she was trying to get it off of her hand and it got on the floor. And she was like, but I'm responsible. And I cleaned it up. And I said, I'm interested that you chose the hand towel to clean it up. Why didn't you just use toilet paper? And she goes, that would be so disgusting. At this point, I did really start to laugh. And I said, how is that the most disgusting part of this? That you would use toilet paper to clean up poop because that's what you use to clean it off yourself all of the time. And she was like, well, yeah, toilet paper goes on your butt, but it does not go on the floor. I thought all the things, right? And thankful that I can laugh. I did wash the hand towel. Hand towel is taken care of and all of the things there. But I laughed a lot that day about poop on the floor and poop on the hand towel and something that maybe should be the most disgusting thing in the world. But instead it was this great story of her actually being really responsible, maybe not in the way that I wanted to. So my husband comes home and I'm telling him this story and he's like, yep, she can take care of herself. She can do some stuff on her own, right? Because she's the youngest. She has watched everybody be responsible and she can be responsible even if it's poop on the floor.
Score.
Score.
She had it down.
She had it down. There are things like that. But I also, one of the things that we do that my parents did too, is they ask questions. They ask questions and they listened to us. And I could have been like, there should never be poop in a towel. Put it in the washing machine. Get it.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, I did laugh, but I asked her questions about it to hear what was going on. And out of it, what did I find? I learned that she's pretty capable of taking care of high need things in the house and being a responsible. There are lots of other reasons why she might not be responsible enough yet. But cleaning the floor, if you have a poop accident, she's your girl. So yeah, we laughed about it and we still laugh about it. That was a good one for the books, for sure.
Speaking of books, I hope you write one someday.
I think about it, but in my spare time, right?
Yeah, we all have it.
Who's got the spare time? And writing a book requires, I think, this is something I probably have to get over. I told you at the beginning of today is I had a really hard weekend. I had a hard parenting weekend. And we had talked about this last week and I was feeling really excited about it and thinking, okay, this is good. And I've done parent education and I've done all of these things. And then I had a weekend that made me question lots of things in parenting. And it was hard. And it was hard as our kids challenge boundaries and try to exert some independence and get into all of these different spaces. And I had, I'm just going to, I have to ask my children often for permission, but I'll just out myself. In true form, I had things that you get from parenting that are a problem. I had a hemorrhoid from childbirth. You want to talk about ruining people's lives, okay? Parenting, the gifts you don't realize you're going to get. I was uncomfortable and had this like pain that other people couldn't see. So it makes it even harder, right? When something happens and you're not only upset emotionally, but I was upset physically. I was thinking, who the heck would trust me to talk about parenting? I can't do this in my house. And I can't even tell someone there's joy in it. I have a hemorrhoid. There's no joy in that, right? I'm not sure I'm qualified to write a book. I, I have to think more about that because I don't know that I could do that. And then I come to a space of why am I not qualified to write a book
That's
when
right.
I have all of these things that are a part of parenting and I can still find the joy in that. My husband and I still found a space where we could laugh, where we could love and find each other in that space too. And that's a gift in and of itself. But it does make me feel sometimes highly unqualified to deal with that when I have hard times
Mm-hmm.
and question the decisions that I'm making and all sorts of things like that too.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I'll write a book someday.
Just have to do it, Chelsea Handler style, where you're.
Oh yeah, there you go. Chelsea Handler style. That is good. She is funny. Me, I'm an amateur funny when I think about it in terms
Yeah,
of Chelsea
you're
Handler
you're
funny.
so funny. You're so funny. But I mean, you have touched on along the way acknowledgement that there are heavy seasons, there are hard times. It's a choice you're making to look for the joy and find the joy. And I'm wondering if there's something that you might say to a parent who's in a really heavy season and is struggling to feel that joy. Now I'm turning you into a therapist instead of an
Right,
author.
right. And probably not qualified for that either. But this is a place that I honestly feel pretty passionate about because it's not just about being a therapist. I think that we were put on this earth to help one another, to be a part of one another's lives. And how do we do that in the best way possible? We share those vulnerabilities and we talk about the hard stuff
Mm-hmm.
and admit like I have a ton of education. I mean, I have a degree in child development and elementary education. I have a master's degree in curriculum and teaching. I have 26 years of experience in the classroom dealing with vastly different levels. I have done parenting education for a million years. And this weekend, I found myself in what I would, from Anne of Green Gables, if you're a person who quotes really great movies, I was in the depths of despair and crying and wondering why God would trust me with 4 kids. And who did I go to? I went to my best friend who's also raised 3 kids, who has struggled and shared the vulnerabilities and the hard parts with me. I think that walking those paths together and sitting with one another is the space that we can be in. And then when you look back sometimes is when you find the joy in that. Was it joyful sitting with my friend crying? No, that part wasn't particularly joyful. But when we parted and we laughed and hugged and loved one another, I am reminded that even in the hardest seasons, I'm never alone. And I think that that's where the great power is in that for parenting, is for all of us to share those spaces that are difficult and be vulnerable in that, to say, hey, this is hard and I'm struggling. And those are hard things to say. I talk about it with families in the classroom on a regular basis. I've had this struggle personally, and I have families that struggle with it now, kids who don't want to go to school. And it's hard to talk about because you feel in a space of the school looking at you saying, just make them come. God, I've been in a place where I can't just make my kid do something. And so to think about it in parenting, where you have to say, you're going to say something vulnerable like, I'm struggling. I'm not sure I'm doing it right. I need some help. Those are really vulnerable spaces to be in. And so that would be my advice mostly to give to people is be vulnerable and ask people for help, but then make sure that you are a safe person for someone else to be vulnerable to,
Mm.
because we do owe ourselves the best for each other. I think that that's a really important space to be in. I've said before that I just want to be a safe person. I want people to be able to come to me and talk to me. And I think one of the things that makes me feel safe to people is that I laugh, is that I can often find joy in things that sometimes other people can't find joy in. An uncomfortable moment. You've probably heard my story of, well, putting my groceries in someone else's car Have I told you that one before?
I think you might have told it to me right around the same time you told me about knocking on the wrong hotel room, ringing the wrong
Oh,
hotel room
yeah, yeah.
doorbell.
There've been 1,000 times that I've been wrong. And the more I talk about when I've been wrong, the more other people are willing to share that they're wrong. I was in the grocery store. I tried to do more than one thing at a time. I was planning in my head and coming out to the car to put my groceries in. And I put my groceries in the back of my van and I got into the front and I pushed that button to start the car and it would not start. And I started to curse my husband because I had told him that the battery in the key fob was low, and darn it, the problem is that he didn't change the battery. Blame, we're all real good at blame when it comes to stuff like this, right? So I'm in my brain blaming my husband as I hear a knock on the window and I turn. And as I turn, something catches my eye in the car. And I suddenly have the realization that I'm not in my own car. I'm in somebody else's car. And sure enough, this tap at the window is this woman yelling, "What are you doing in my car?" And I am shocked, and I literally said to her, as I opened the door, I said, it's not me, it's my groceries. Right back to blame, because I'm gonna blame those groceries that are in the back of her car. And now I have to walk back to the car return. I have to get a whole cart. I have to open the back of her van and load my groceries from the back of her van back into the cart. And she is yelling at me. I'm thinking she might call the police. But, you know, here's the thing. Any one of us could do that. And there are times when I still blame that woman, because if she had locked her car, that would not have happened to her. And she parked in my favorite spot. I think that's the other thing. I came out on autopilot and went to my favorite spot. So there were lots of offenses here. I would like to say none of which was me putting my groceries in the wrong car, but I'm pretty sure that was the biggest offense. But look, sharing this kind of vulnerability, that could happen to any one of us, where we're hyper focused and we do some things, and to own those things and say them out loud and remember that they're funny. We're all going to do stuff like that. I think that opens up the conversation to others to feel safe and be able to say, "Hey, I've made some pretty silly mistakes too." And in parenting, man, you can't get through this if you don't rely on friends and
Mhm.
trust people and ask for help in spaces, because it is not meant for us to do alone.
Amy, Holly, and I are working on a little bit of a research project. And I could be stealing your words, Amy. I don't know if you were going to say that or not.
No, no, go right ahead.
Oh, we've sort of been collecting these sticky notes as we talk to groups and present and teach about where people feel joy and find joy. And as we look at the answers on the sticky notes, it is clear that it is in connection with other people.
Oh,
And so, so the fact that you keep circling back to that, being able to talk to your friend, being able to be vulnerable, being able to voice your mistakes so that others can also grow more comfortable in voicing their own, or
mhm.
being able to ask a question because of it.
I just think that it's so huge. It's one of the biggest parts. And I think that I shared with you before, my best friend. You meet different people in different seasons of your life, and it makes a difference. And I moved around a lot. So it wasn't, I'm not one of those people who necessarily has someone that I met that has known me from when I was very young. But my best friend, I met her. She was my roommate when I moved back to the US to go to college. And we just took our 30-year friend anniversary
Ooh.
pictures, which were, they go to the song Goodbye Earl. We're like burying a body in the pictures. It's pretty fun. But she's the person that I called the other night when I needed someone. We laugh about I told you that I was pregnant 7 times. I lost 3 babies. And the first time I was in the parking lot of her work, and I called her and I said, "I need you. And I'm in your parking lot." And I'm not kidding. I couldn't hang up the phone. And she was right outside my
Mhm.
window. She came right out. And right behind her was her sister-in-law, who's also a very good friend of mine. And she said, "Jen, you pushed me down." And she said, "I had to get to Casey. She needed me." She's also the person that when I was going through a hard time, actually a sexual assault investigation from a time that I had in my life a long time ago, I called her and said, "Hey, you want to go for a ride with me?" And she said, "Yeah." And I pulled up to her house and she got in the car and I started driving. She said, "Where are we going?" And I said, Channel 10, they want to do an interview and I'm too scared to do it by myself. And she went, let's go.
Hmm.
She has walked through things with me and I wouldn't make it without her. She has been at the birth of every one of my children. We often make a joke that she, when my husband cut the cord on one of them, she got squirted with blood, right? Yuck. But we laugh about it. She's seen me pee my pants because another gift of parenting, weak bladder, right? And what
and
happened?
laughter,
And
parenting and
laughter.
laughter. So
Exactly. And what happens when you are with your best friend and you're holding a newborn baby and you start to laugh? Because if you're with your best friend, you, of course, are going to laugh. And if you're holding a newborn baby, you are postpartum. And you know what happens? And I told I went to my doctor for my week checkup actually the next day. And I said, I'm embarrassed. I wet my pants. And she goes, oh, yeah, that can happen. Right after you have a kid, you sometimes cannot hold it. What were you doing? And I said, well, laughing. And she goes, oh, yeah, you should only laugh on the toilet. And I thought, oh, that's really good advice. But I don't want to sit on the toilet every time I'm hanging out with my best friend, right? But I thought it was really pretty good advice too. But back to the gifts of parenting, weak bladder from childbirth and all of the things. There's a lot of gifts. There's a lot of things to be joyful about in that space.
and I feel like that's a good chapter title for that book too. You should only pee on the toilet or only laugh on the
Right.
toilet.
Only laugh on the toilet. I'm going to write that one down on my sticky note here. That goes in my book space. I think it's funny that I didn't realize that other people use sticky notes as much as I do until, well, you were talking about it. Other
Oh.
people talk about it.
Our whole research project folder is called Joy Sticky Notes.
Yep. It's all based off of sticky notes.
That sounds like a good title for your book too.
Right. Yeah, that works. So, as we're kind of getting ready to wrap up, and we've heard you talk a lot about the experiences you had as a child and how this is really generational for you. What do you hope, or what are your hopes for your children in their adult years? And what do you want them to be able to kind of look back and laugh at? And then also, what do you hope that they'll do in their created families in the future? Do you kind of hope for the same sense of joy or something else? Maybe entirely.
So wow, that's like a really, really great question.
Amy's good at questions.
Yes, really good. I don't think this is unique to me. I think this is a lot of parents. I wish for more for them, more, right? I wish them more joy than I have ever had or experienced. I wish them more laughter than I've ever had or experienced. I find myself, I've had one of them say for sure, I don't ever want to have kids. And I think, oh no, don't rob me of the joy of having grandchildren. Really, when let's be honest, that's another thing about parenting that you have to do a lot. It's not about me, right? It's about them and remembering that space. But what I do think sometimes, and I have said this to her since, of course, the first time she said it, I responded inappropriately, like, you should never say that. You might want to have children. But does that really, But I have since been able to say, that may be, but I hope you find joy in whatever it is. And I know how much joy you have in our family. And so whether or not you have your own kids or you're enjoying someone else's, I think you'll enjoy the future of the world. That's what I wish for and hope for them when I think of it on this existential, is that even the word I want to use, level of that. But one of the hardest parts about parenting is recognizing that, and my dad he still gives. My dad gave me the best advice growing up in a lot of ways. He still gives the best advice. My dad used to always tell me, life is really about day-to-day living. It's about finding the joy in every day and in those spaces, because if you're always just looking for something or waiting for the next thing, you're going to miss the middle. And so that is advice that I give to my kids now, that I hope for them. I hope that they don't miss the middle, because that's where some of the best pieces are. It's the space. Look, it's the poop towel. It's the space between them relying on me and their independence. It's the joy of watching someone else on that journey, but also seeing it as my own journey. It's hard to say what I hope for them, because what I have learned in this world is I don't know what's coming.
Mm.
It's hard for me to say this is where I hope they go, because I don't always know what's coming. But to find the joy in the now is really great and really powerful. And sometimes you'll find that you can love the poop in the towel because it represents the journey on the way.
Yeah.
It represents getting there. So that's what I really hope, is that they can enjoy the journey and laugh a lot on the way. And that those are the memories they have of me, because this weekend wasn't a great, laughing, joyful time. It was hard, and there was yelling and words that I maybe wasn't proud of. And my hemorrhoids hurt.
Mhm.
But we came out of it. And I want them to see that there's even joy in the hard stuff. It's about getting there and learning it.
Mm.
So joy in the
Casey,
journey.
thank you so much for sharing all the real things that happen on the parenting journey, and your ability to laugh about it, and clearly your ability to cry through it as well and share it with others. I think we'll all benefit from just being able to be more vulnerable when we're reminded, and finding someone to laugh with.
Yeah. Thanks for spending time with me today, because I did laugh a lot. I've never done anything like this before. And while I felt unqualified, I feel like we've had some pretty darn good discussion and laughed.
And you're wearing really cute pink headphones that we will make sure
Yeah.
everyone gets
Thank
to
you.
see.
Yeah. Highlight those definitely. So thank you. I wish you joy.
Thank you. We can't wait for you to come back.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to This Was Supposed to Be Easy. Remember, the best stories are the ones we live.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep the conversation going, because life may not be easy, but listening in should be.
Stay curious, stay connected, and keep wondering.